Hey, my name is Pastor Sunil, and welcome to our archive messages. You can join us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. in person or catch us live online. We hope that you're truly blessed by this message, and once again, thanks for tuning in.
So good. Take your Bibles, turn to Acts chapter 11. We're going to have a few scriptures we'll look at today. We've been doing this series on generosity, and just to highlight again, and just to give a special highlight to that service on July 2nd, you know, I don't know the exact numbers as of right now, but I was reading statistics that said the Welland has approximately 14% of the population of Welland has French as their mother tongue, as they speak French as their initial language, and most of those are bilingual. I was thinking of that, and we were kind of sitting through thinking of our church and how many people speak French, and many in the office speak French. We actually, we're in the process of getting some T-shirts that say, rather than the welcome, you've seen the welcome T-shirts that say bienvenue, and so those people that obviously are able to speak French have those on, so if someone comes that's French speaking, they'll just have someone they can engage with and know. It was just on my heart and mind, and as a leadership, we've been praying about this July 2nd as a chance for us to get together and celebrate diversity. I mean, that's what Canada is. We've got 2 official languages. It's pretty cool. And we're going to be celebrating and praying on that morning. I was talking to our mayor, inviting him to come, and telling him that we were praying for unity and transformation for our church and for our region and for individuals that live here, including you and your neighbor. And so I encourage you to be a part of that day. The morning service, again, English is at 9 a.m. service, and then after that service, we've got a guest coming, but after that service, he's bringing with him from Quebec. We're importing maple syrup from Quebec. He's bringing real maple syrup for the pancakes, not that fake stuff, and we couldn't have fake maple syrup on Canada's 150th birthday. So he's bringing maple syrup. We're going to have a pancake breakfast in between, and then the English service at 11. So invite someone out, English or French. I would encourage you to probably invite the English person out to the English service and the French people at the French service. They're not going to be, they're not services that are going to have translators in them. It's French service and English service. So anyways, looking forward to that. We're doing generosity as a series, and God's Spirit is wherever God's Spirit is, and wherever is alive and people surrendering and walking by the Spirit of God, there will be generosity. Because God's generous, and God is obviously wanting to reach out, extend so much to His people and to His creation. However, that is hindered sometimes, where people who are dead end. He gives, they take, that's the end. And so, as a result, sometimes you can see there's hindrance in giving. God's not hindered, don't get me wrong. He'll continue to find a way to how to bless. But wherever He is moving and people are surrendering to Him and following His leading, they will walk in generosity because He is a God who wants to be generous. Those who experience a rich and generous spiritual life can't help but celebrate it by giving in all kinds of ways. In the Old Testament, there was many times when God moved mightily among His people, and those times are marked by a time of generosity. In fact, this is not our text, but just as a note, it's rather kind of comical, actually. I think every pastor reads this and says, yeah, right. Exodus chapter 36, and there's a time when giving became so great that they had to do something about it. And the people continued to bring free will offerings. That means they came and brought an offering, whatever they in their heart to bring. Morning after morning, an offering, morning after morning. So all the skilled workers were doing all the work in the sanctuary, left what they were doing, and said to Moses, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord commanded to be done. Then Moses, see, this is the first problem with storage. This is usually a problem in the church. Where are we going to... Yeah, right. We usually store the junk. We don't store the offerings. They didn't know where to put all the stuff. Then Moses gave an order, and they sent this word out. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained from bringing more because what they had already had was more than enough to do the work. Oh, Lord, maybe it'd be a great announcement. Wouldn't that be on a video announcement? We're really excited to be able to say, please stop bringing your offerings. We've got enough to do the work of the Lord. can imagine. What was happening was they were part of a vision. God had planned the vision. He was doing a work in their lives individually, obviously, and became a more than a trend. It just became almost an epidemic of generosity among God's people, to the point where they had to say, enough. One of the most defining characteristics of Christ, and should be of Christianity, is compassion. The most important quality that would define us, Christ said specifically, they will know that you are my disciples, people that follow me, by the way you love one another. So let's get into this, and then we're going to close. At the end of this, I'm going to have a video that I want to show you of when I think of someone who is generous towards those who are in a position of need, I immediately thought of this missionary. I'm going to show you a quick video of him at the end. Christians, Acts chapter 11 and 25. Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. I can imagine. I just love that phrase. When we read that, we just read past it. Can you imagine? Have you ever been looking for somebody? Now what do you do if you're looking for somebody? Text them. You call them, right? Where'd they go? I can't even imagine. Now, and I remember what it was like before everybody had cell phones and you could just get them. You give the kids cell phones, not for them, for you as the parent, so you know where they are. That's why you give where are you? How many times? That is like in my frequent texts. I just copy and paste it in. Where are you? When will you be home? Well, if you're looking for somebody, imagine in this day, there was no cell phones, there was no internet, no email, no Snapchat. There was no way to be able to, how did you find? Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. That's it. I think he was in Tarsus last. Imagine, I went down to Grimsby to look for Dave Shurton. Dave? Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. And when he found him, of course he went there and found him. It's a big city of bustling people and just went. I imagine there's a little bit of time in between that. Went to look. When he found him, he brought him to Antioch. You're sticking with me. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The church was growing. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. Now that's a neat statement, isn't it? The first time they called them Christians, followers of Christ, followers of the way. The first time was in Antioch. I thought that was kind of interesting. And now, why would they give them this name, Christian? Why would they say and associate this group of believers are followers of Christ? Associate them with Christ. Why? Because what they were doing and how they were acting and how they were living life and their priorities in life are priorities and characteristics that were similar and following after the one of Christ. That's pretty easy, right? I get it. Paul later calls believers who follow after Christ living epistles. A word epistle is kind of a funny sounding word. It means living letters. People that are never going to read maybe this Bible, read this Bible many times before they read this Bible. And they're going to follow the good news of this Bible before they read the good news of this Bible. So, how many people that are reading the good news or the letter of this Bible or that Bible or that Bible, when they get to this Bible, are going to find something that is the same? Or when they find it different, wait a minute, that's not the kind of Christians I've seen. Or maybe some, by the way they read this letter, which is kind of like the first letter they're going to read, they don't even want to open the second letter. Because after they've read the first letter, they go, I don't care to read that letter. That doesn't interest me in the least. But how many that might, when they read this letter, will say, I want to know more about that. How can you be that way? Why do you do this? Why have you helped me? Why did you stop to talk to me? What is it about you that's different? When they read this letter, they get some questions, and so they read this letter to get some more answers. Christians, followers of Christ, we should be second mile people. Our conduct defines us more than our creeds. We're great at organizing, and historically the church has wanted to put together we believe and we believe. And I've said this more than once, but eventually all matters of theology must become biography. You can say that you believe in prayer, or you can say you believe this is God's word. You can believe this is God's word, but if you believe it is God's word and it gives you direction in life today, then when you have a need for direction, you'll read it. The point to which you believe it, you will do it. If you believe that God hears, listens, and answers prayer, then you will pray. All theology must become a matter of biography, must actually be done. People care more about our conduct, what we will do. That matters more than what we say we believe. Show me you believe it. We can say we care, but do we care? If we're no different than those who live life for themselves or pursue the things that benefit their own desires, then how can we claim that we serve a difference maker? If we don't live a transformed life, how can we declare that God is someone who transforms? Christians during the 2nd century, let me read to you this. This is a historical document from the 2nd century. It's a letter written, it says, by an unknown person and preserved in a letter to Diogenetus. Christians are not differentiated, he says. This is in the 2nd century. Christians are not differentiated from other people by country, language, or customs. You see, they do not live in cities of their own or speak some strange dialect. They live in both Greek and foreign cities wherever chance has put them. They follow local customs in clothing, food, and other aspects of life. But at the same time, they demonstrate to us the unusual form of their own citizenship. They live in their own native lands, but as aliens. Every foreign country is to them as their native country, and every native land as a foreign country. They marry and have children, just like everyone else, but they do not kill unwanted babies. They offer a shared table, but not a shared bed. They are passing their days on earth, but are citizens of heaven. They obey the appointed laws and go beyond the laws in their own lives. They love everyone, but are persecuted by all. They are put to death and gain life. They are poor and yet make many rich. They are dishonored and yet gain glory through dishonor. Their names are blackened and yet they are cleared. They are mocked and bless in return. They are treated outrageously and behave respectfully to others. When they do good, they are punished as evildoers. When punished, they rejoice as if being given new life. They are attacked by Jews as aliens and are persecuted by Greeks. Yet those who hate them cannot give any reason for their hostility. Quite an interesting description, isn't it? Wonder what a letter about us today would say. I read this and it makes me think, what would a letter about me say today? Christians historically have been the foundation of a lot of the good in the world. It was believers in the Word of God and followers after Christ that often opened up hospitals, medical centers. Some of the early missionaries, that's one of the first things they did. Educated, helped people try to gain in life and have a hope for the future. Some of our colleges were based on Christian principles and a desire to educate and help people have a better life. Our legal system was a formulation of order and structure that is based on protecting the innocent. Real Christians make a difference. Transform. Get involved. Real Christians don't drink in their own success or bask in their own glory, but they find a way to use the blessing they have to help those who are in a position of need. His people sharing his life. We're to be sensitive and compassionate towards those who are in need. Calamity. Something has happened. So they're first called Christians in Antioch. Acts chapter 11, verses 27-28. Let me read for you. Hard times came. During this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up, here's a good rap name, stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. And as a historical stamp, this happened during the reign of Claudius. The believers in Jerusalem were about to be hit very hard by a famine that affected the whole region. God warns the church. He warns them through a couple of individuals that prophesied. Now, this is the first mentioning of this gift in the book of Acts. This is no kind of like, oh, somebody here has got a headache. This is he is mentioning this when things are going really well. The Roman world is prospering. He's saying, they came down, they said, there is coming a time when the whole Roman region is going to suffer, and there is going to be great suffering. God warns the church, gives them a heads up. What we know about this is not God's punishment. It's just that God's given them a heads up that this is coming. But it's a situation, a circumstance that's completely out of their control. Nothing they can do about it. It's the tsunami. It's the lightning strike. Nothing you could have done about it. It's the diagnosis that just came down the pipe and you got it. It's it. Out of your control, nothing you can do about it. Historically, we know this did take place. Tell us where and when, and the church suffered greatly. Now, I want to speak two-pronged. So before you get mad at me and start throwing your Bible at me and leave, hear me out with the second part of this. Number one, they were poor and would be poor because of situations out of their control. I'm going to speak candidly, carefully. The Bible speaks pretty clearly to those people who are, it's even hard but I sound fatherly when I'm saying this, but it's true, who refuse to work or are lazy or are slothful. It's saying, I love the word slothful, because think of the sloth, like teenagers in the morning when it's time to go to school, kind of sloth, right? We need to, as much as our ability, and even in the New Testament there's examples where it says we need to reach out to the poor, and we need to help the widows and the orphans, but it even says helping those people who aren't able to help themselves. But there are some that are able to do something about their situation, and they need to do something about the situation, so more money can go towards the people that can't help themselves. And so I'm not making in any way, and I'm not making any judgment on people. I'm not declaring, hey, you, some broad stroke statement that says all people who are in a difficult circumstances because they're lazy. I am not saying that at all. But I am saying you can't go through life wanting everybody else to do everything and you not wanting to do anything to your best of your ability and expect everything to come to you. That doesn't happen. I've had that grilled into me when I'm a young kid. You work hard. My grandpa says, you work hard, you'll always have a job. Don't worry about specialty. Your specialty is you work hard. Whatever it is you're doing, that'll come. You'll always have a job if you work hard. It's doing the best of your ability. Now, that's the first prong. That's the first one. The second one is this. There are even more strong warnings to the church if they ignore those who are in a difficult place in life. So we can say there is a warning. Everybody needs to do what they can. You can't, it says that there's one of my favorites in the old Proverbs is the farmer that's constantly looking to the clouds will never get anything planted. If you're always saying, well, I'm waiting, I think it might rain. We better not plant today. I think it might rain. What about today? Well, you're always coming up with an excuse not to work. Rather than saying, well, we're going to get out and get as much planted as we can before the rain comes. Do what you can with what you got where you are. The second one is, we can't just, and this is what a lot of people, they think, you know what, those people, they just haven't helped themselves. They just need to snap up and get to it. Pull up their socks, their bootstraps. Get her on. Get going. And think that that's why I don't need to help them, is because they're not helping themselves. Don't be so naive. There is even greater warnings for those that have ability and have an opportunity to be able to do something about the needs that they see. And if they don't do it, the Bible says it's a sin. It's a travesty. It is wrong. So we can easily point fingers and say, you know what the problem is laziness. No, it's two-pronged and just as equal of instruction to both. Do what you can for yourself so the things that we have and the blessings we have can go and help those people that can't help themselves. And over here, if you're in a position of blessing, then you have a responsibility to help those people that are in a situation out of their control. And those two prongs guide us. Do everything you can do on your own, and also make sure you're helping those people, because there's always somebody else that's in a situation that's more difficult than you. Collections were taken to help. Reaction to this catastrophe when it came, what did they do? Did they hide their head in the sand? Did they run away from the Roman Empire? Why did this warning come? I don't know, but I know this. The response to the situation when it came was poured out generosity. And it wasn't just the wealthier saints that gave. It was everybody giving, as we see in verse 29, according to their ability. Everybody gave. Paul was confident in asking the believers to be sensitive to the poor. You see, he does it more than once. Look at verses 29 to 30, the care that came. The disciples, as each one was able, decided to provide help for the brothers and the sisters living in Judea. This they did, sending their gift to the elders by Barnabas and Saul. Now, more about this later, about how they're always sending it in pairs and the accountability. I'm going to get that as my last point. But just note, the sacrificial giving and selfless compassion were marks of the way of Christ. People giving and open-handed. You see, oftentimes, and I've compared this prosperity gospel, where we see this kind of get rich quick, pray to God to get rich stuff. And then this giving mode that is you give because you got to give, and if you don't give, you're breaking the rules, and you give just because it's the rules and because you have to. And then there's transformational giving. You're giving because it's what Christ would do, and he's made a difference in your life, and you no longer live for yourself, but you're living for others and for Christ. This transformational. I've been comparing these as we go through the series and writing them down as I do. Prosperity is the grasping hands. We're constantly, we're in it. Does it mean that I get more for myself? I'm in it. I believe that prosperity gospel because I can name it and claim it, blab it and grab it, right? Then if I can get more, great. If I can grasp it, if I can get it, I'll get it. And over here is the legal. This is the tight-fisted. This is the fighting. Well, we'll get it. We're always, I'm going to give my 10%, but begrudgingly, and you can pry it out of my fingers. That's 5%, 10%. And then we give our 10%, but then we're going to grab our hold of the other 90% because it's legalism. No. You said 10%. So don't you even bother about with this other 90%. That's mine. The Lord's is 10. This is mine. We've got a contract here, God. Legalistic. And the other one, the transformational giving, is open-handed. I recognize that I've only received because my hands have been open and I've received from God. And when I receive them, I don't clench them over here. I don't grasp it. I don't stay and keep them tight. I just keep them open. So when they're open to receive and open to give. In Deuteronomy, it says, don't be hard-hearted and tight-fisted towards the poor and the needy in your land, but be open-handed. Be generous. God has blessed you. Keep your hands open when he blesses you and being ready to give it to those who need. That's what God's calling us to. Care. When the disciples heard that there was a need, they decided, and I love that word, decided, intentional, about helping those people in another completely different region. Their giving was according to their abilities. Help those in Judea. The sum of money was not any small potatoes. It was quite a bit. The Macedonian church, they also jumped in and they helped. The church in Corinthians, they helped because their arms were twisted a little bit. Remember that sermon from a while ago? They offered. Some of the poorer churches gave some of the greater gifts, ironically. And some of the richer churches, some of them had more means and more ability to respond to need. They were slow in responding. Remember that sermon was a few weeks ago, and Paul had to kind of write them and go, hey, you said you were going to give a gift. I told these people that you were in and you were going to get a gift. Now they have decided to give a gift. They can't even afford to give. They begged for the chance to give. And now we've got their gift, and we're passing it on to these poor people, but you were the first one to say, yeah, we're in, and you still haven't given. So please don't make this an embarrassment. We need to make sure that you've got that gift and you follow through with your promise. And he had to kind of twist it. But eventually, the Corinthian church came through and they on their promise to be able to give. Many churches helping out, blessing, and caring. We need to be able to give our best. We talked about this last week, first fruits. You know, farmers, when they first started planting potatoes a while ago, I don't know if you saw this, but I went by a farmer's market the other day and they had seed potatoes. Seed potatoes. I remember my grandpa used to plant potatoes, or potatoes, I guess it's not potatoes. When he would say it, it was potatoes. Actually, it was almost like a D, it was in there, potatoes. And he would farmers would plant potatoes, and one of the earlier ones, they started to do it, they had a good harvest, but after a time, they realized the potatoes were getting smaller. And they realized what they were doing unintentionally is they were keeping the bigger potatoes. I don't know if does anybody else have a pet peeve when you buy a bag of potatoes, and they're pretty good price, but you can't see in them. You know the bags that don't have windows? You know what I'm talking about, little mesh windows or something? Am I the only one? I mean, if you want to buy the potatoes on the where you can see all the potatoes, that costs more. Or you can get the grab bag of potatoes. That's the one where you don't know. You never know. They might be big or they might be small in there, right? And you open it up and you go to get them out and they're all these, like I got kind of big clubby fingers. And I'm just trying to work this, I don't care what it is, Starfrit or whatever you want, Betty Crocker, whatever the peeler is. Man, I have trimmed my nails and worked off my calluses by the time I get that potato done. Is this like, I'm like, it's a little wee potato. What they used to do is they kept the big potatoes for themselves. They would eat those, or they would sell those. And the only potatoes they used for seed were the small potatoes. I don't know if you know that, but they have a little eye on the potato, that little thing. You keep a couple of those. I remember doing this with my dad. He would keep a few, cut them up, and you plant them, and they grow. And it's a great lesson in the harvest. You sow, a half of a potato, and you get like 12 potatoes. It's an awesome return of investment. It's like 20, 30 times to one. It's amazing. So you cut it up and you stick it in there and you get potato. What they were doing, they kept using the small potatoes for the seed without knowing it. They genetically worked out the larger gene in the potatoes by only planting smaller ones over and over again. We do the same thing. I wonder how sometimes we are reserving and giving to God or to others only what is small, keeping what is best for ourselves, and wonder, we actually expect to get a large dividend for this small reserved investment. Sow sparingly, reap sparingly is the biblical principle. Early Christians were sensitive to the needs of the poor. Churches like the Macedonian church, they just didn't give a little. They were in a position of great need, but they gave greater than was expected. It's a mark of a follower of Christ. A characteristic of a nation or a church or an individual that is declining is a nation or an individual or a church that is selfish. Spirit of Christ Encourage us to be generous. Some people misuse and misunderstand us. Charles Spurgeon, I love some of his writings, a unique writer and preacher. He was being criticized over and over again later on in his ministry because he was frugal, stingy. They said he was greedy. Now, some of these rumors were happening, and it didn't come later on until after his wife died, actually, that the truth came out. It all stemmed from the fact that he owned some chickens. And he would sell the chicken eggs. To even the closest of family, he would not give a discount. You buy them. So they said, you're all this popular, preaching all these places, you're all this, and you're still charging me for eggs? It came out after the fact that the Spurgeons had a passion to help these two widow ladies that did not have means to be able to provide for themselves. They were giving all the proceeds of the eggs of these chickens to those two widows. No one knew that. And you know what? The Spurgeons took all the heat they wanted because they tried to keep the dignity and respect for those two widows. So they took it on themselves. Even took heat for it, being called greedy when in fact they were being generous. Giving because they saw a need. Communal. I'm going to flip now to Romans chapter 15 if you want to just go one book to the right. If you got your Bible, you're following along. I'm going to first read, and this is, if you're new to church, there's the Jews, or kind of Jesus came in the Old Testament to the Hebrews. And then when Christ came, he started ministering to not just Hebrews, but also to Gentiles, which is basically non-Hebrews. And then when the book of Acts came, he poured out his Spirit on all flesh. It doesn't matter your race, your color of your skin, your language, your region geographically. It doesn't matter. So it came out from just God's people, which are generally in kind of Jerusalem area. But in Jerusalem, Samaria, Judea, that this good news went all out. So the Gentiles, or the non-Hebrews, started to receive the gospel as the followers of Christ spread out to minister the way he did to those regardless of race and regardless of the color of their skin or their gender. It didn't matter. Just this is the gospel for all. And so as a part of that, it was interesting because there's a couple of guys that did that. Paul, he would minister to both, but mostly to the Gentiles, the non-Hebrews. Then there's a group of the disciples that were a part of the original crew. Peter, James, and John, those example. Those are all three Hebrew kind of Christians. Their demographic would be they were Hebrew, but they were followers of Christ. And so it was interesting that Paul says in Galatians chapter 2, just note this, all they asked, he was talking about Peter, James, and John. He said that he wants to go down into the Gentile regions with the gospel. And Peter, James, and John, these leaders in the church who had a Hebrew background, said, we're good with that. All they ask is that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I've been eager to do all along. And he says, yeah, absolutely. Go and minister to the Gentiles. We just put one condition on you. Make them Hebrew. No, that's not what they said. We have one condition. Remember the poor when you go. What a send-off. Go and take the good news of Jesus Christ into wherever. Go and take the gospel. But just one condition. Make sure you remember the poor. I can hear this resonating to churches today. Have we heard this command? Sure, absolutely. Build the church. Sure, plant another church. Sure, go and be a pastor in that area that doesn't have a pastor. Absolutely. Awesome. Go. Sure, yeah. Where you go in missions. Go across the world. Amazing. One condition. Do not forget the poor. One condition. Do we still hear that condition? Have we shirked our responsibility with that commission? I don't know. It's quite a challenging expression. They got this blessing. It's interesting because later it would be these Gentile churches, these non-Hebrew churches, that when the need came in the Hebrew city of Jerusalem, among the Hebrew believers there in the church in Jerusalem, it would be these non-Hebrew churches that would be kicking in help and finances to help that church. You see? Communal. We're all in this together. We need to share when we're in a time of blessing because we just might find ourselves in a time of need at some point. Communal. Sharing lightens the load of crisis, especially in events that are out of the realm of our control. Romans chapter 15, 23. Here's Paul's plan to visit Rome. Remember, this drought was going to happen in Rome area. But now that there is no more place for me to work in these regions, and since I have been longing for many years to visit you, I plan to do so when I go to Spain. I hope to see you while passing through, and to have you assist me on my journey there, after I have enjoyed your company for a while. Now, however, I am on my way to Jerusalem in the service of the Lord's people there. Paul mentions the Macedonian church, and I've talked about this before, how they help out, their eagerness in giving. He states that there was an owe. It's interesting when you read it. He talks about the fact that they owe a debt. They've been a blessing. They owe it to them, as I get in a few moments. When we have generously received, how can we hold back from returning blessing? Paul reminds them, as we'll read in a few moments, a few verses later, they're really all one community. We're all one. And if one of us hurts, we all hurt. And so when one needs help, we all help. The real concern for each other. Sharing lightens the load. Changes people from where they used to be to the way they are. Collecting. Let me read on. Romans chapter 15, verses 26 to 27. Collecting. I'm going to read to you about that time when he says they owe it to them. For Macedonia and Achaia were pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the Lord's people in Jerusalem. This is it. See, this is the non-Hebrew are helping out those in Jerusalem. They were pleased to do it. And indeed, they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have shared in the Jews' spiritual blessings, they owe it to the Jews to share with them material blessings. Here's what he's saying. They've received transformation in their life spiritually. They've come alive spiritually. And that is because this church sent out Paul and other believers with the gospel of Christ, good news about grace and forgiveness and mercy and freedom. And so they came with this and shared spiritual blessing with them. And then because they've received spiritual blessing, how can you receive and not in turn give and help when they have a need? It's more, don't get caught up on just the spiritual and the material, and we should, it's more along the line of we're all in this together. They share, we have reciprocal relationship. They're helping us, we're helping them. You can do that, I can do this. We can do this together. That's what he's referring to. We need to freely give because we never know when we might need to receive. Prosperity gospel says God is a genie. We do this, 1, 2, 3, we rub it 3 times and poof, and we get our 3 wishes. Number 1, wish what you want. Number 2, wish what you want. And number 3, wish for 3 more wishes. Genie. Or we have number 2, that he's a bill collector. God's the legalistic form of it, says I need to be generous because I got to be generous or else I get investigated. And I'm going to have penalties, and because he's taxing us, he's saying, you need to give, and you need to give this amount, or you're in trouble. And the last one is transformational giving. He says, I can give because the fact that I have is because God's provided, and God's a provider. He's going to provide for my needs, and he just might be providing for your needs by providing for my needs. He's given me more than enough for me, and so if I share it with you, he's providing for me and for you through me. It's seeing God as a provider rather than just as a tax collector or rather than just a genie so I can just be able to say what I want to say, put some money in and get what I want out. He's transformational. He's a giving. Why we need to give is because at one point we need to collect. Solomon talks about this. Now, don't get caught up in this, and I'm going to bring this to an end, but I love this topic. This is one of my favorite. I'm going to refer to this verse a little bit later as well in the Message version, but you've probably heard this in Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Cast your bread upon the water, for you will find it after many days. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. Now, we've heard the one, cast your bread upon the water, and soon it'll come back. I don't know do you remember that, the Imperials? Cast your bread upon the water. I mean, some of you, I'm giving myself age. Soon it's going to come back home on every. Yeah, maybe. Good measure, press down, shake it together. Yeah, so that was from a while ago. That was when I first was able to listen to Christian rock. That was way back a long time ago. And Petra was like, no way at the beginning. We had to work into Petra a little bit. So we had Imperials. Cast your bread upon the water. We didn't see this 7. Make sure you do a placement for 7 or for 8, or make sure you pass some more. Now, do you know what it means to cast your bread upon the water? Now, if you perhaps, okay, let me give you if you have a fish pond, you'll know what it means to cast the bread upon the water. If I got a loaf of bread, I save a couple of pieces and throw it on the top of the water. The fish come and eat it. And as I do this often, always reserve a little bit of the bread rather than just for my table, but some of the bread, rather than all of it going on my table and into my stomach, goes on to the fish pond. One day, I will reap a harvest of nice big fat fish. And I'm going to have now a fish meal along with a little bit of bread. And then I'll take a little bit of bread and I'll put it on top of the water. You cast what you have. You don't use up everything you have for now, but you cast some of what you have now on the water, because in time it comes back and yields a dividend and a harvest. Many people live from paycheck to paycheck, consuming, and this is not a financial lesson, but I believe this is a universal principle. It is not good to consume everything you have now. You must cast bread upon the water. Put away, invest. Now, this is not a financial planning seminar. The investment I'm referring to is take a bit of what you have and invest it generously in others. I can't tell you how important this is. When I pastored small church, I remember when I came out of Bible college, it was a very small church. I mean, we had bad weather. Yeah, it was... we didn't have a prayer circle. We had like a 2 prayer spots when we would have bad weather. But it was small. But I remember we had limited finances, and we were receiving, this church was receiving, those would give to the district to help out other churches. They would receive money from the district and from other churches just to exist and be alive, because they couldn't make it on their own. And I remember at the very beginning struggling with the fact that we were receiving and not giving. And so I remember having the discussions about we need to think of a missionary and we need to give money back to help other churches. And they were like, well, what do you mean? We need the money. Let me tell you this, church. I learned something that very first church, living in that little schoolhouse. It was a 1-hallway school, brick. I would live in the nursery. That was kind of where I stayed, and we put a bed in there and some dresser drawers and moved the nursery down the hall. But I remember we didn't have a lot of money at all. But we cannot afford to be dead ends. As a church, I knew we needed to be generous with what we had. That God was holding us responsible to not only receive, but to give from what we received. It's a principle that I was raised on, and I believe it's true for the individual, and it's true for the institution. We must look for ways. God does not just bless us to bless us. He blesses us to bless others. We needed to cast our bread upon the water. Take some for what we need, but also make sure we invest some. And if we're going to invest, not just so I can get more later, but invest in the kingdom. The suggestion here is when it says to cast your bread upon the water, it's not like just put it on the water with a rope so you can pull it back if you need it. Not like a savings account. Well, I can access it if I got to. It's referring to cast it. Spread it out. Diversify, if you want to make it into financial language. Just spread out blessing. because you never know when sometime you might need it to come back. Truth of the matter is, what's the difference feeding? We know. Feeding 6 is not much more than feeding 5, right? I mean, if you feed 5, feeding 6, how much more is one more plate? I mean, feeding 7, feed 8. Sleeping 7 and sleeping 8, not much more difference, just an extra pillow and any space on the floor. So he's saying, you know what, rather than just looking at your 6, rather than just providing for your 6, provide for 7 or 8. It's a good principle. This giving campaign was organized. Commitment, Romans 15, verses 28 to 30. And we're going to draw to a close here. So after I've completed this task and have made sure that they have received this contribution, I will go to Spain and visit you on the way. I know that when I come to you, I will come in the full measure of the blessing of Christ. After I complete this task, I'll make sure they've received the contribution, and then I'll come and I'll see you. The giving campaign was organized. He was going to make sure that it was intentional. He was also going to make sure that he was committed to seeing this thing to the end. There was a commitment to Christ and a commitment to the things that Christ is committed to. Biblical givers need to expect integrity and accountability from those that receive the collection. I see some great wisdom in what Paul's doing here. I want to come and see you guys, but some people have given a gift. And so with this gift, here's my travel log. I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go there, then I come back to you. Here's the people who are going with me. We've got respectful people that other people have selected. We read another text in 1 Corinthians 16. It talks about how, you know what, I'll send this guy to go because he's a respectable and person of integrity. You guys pick somebody among you to go with them. So we make sure that there is things in place and protocols so that everything is done right. So there's integrity, accountability. I see that woven right in here. And yes, and I can tell you this, a generous church all the more needs to have safeguards and things in place and accountability. Must. You cannot say, well, we don't want these systems because we want to be generous. Bunk. All the more you need safeguards. You need to guard against temptation. You need to guard against just mistakes. We need to be a good steward. And I can tell you, he doesn't say, you know what, just give me the money and I'll take care of it. No. This church was expecting, and the leader, Paul, was free with the information. I'm happy to tell you how. I'll challenge you to give and challenge you to be generous as a church, Paul is saying. But I will make sure I'm a good steward and I'm accountable with what you've given. Why? Because this is money that we know from the Macedonia church that has been given sacrificially. This is money that is needed where it's going, and every bit needs to make it there. That's why. It's wise to protect, wise to guard. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, many times there's a plurality of people that are involved. More than one person has taken the financial gift. In fact, I could not find, if you find one, let me know, but I couldn't find where he just takes it himself. He's usually saying someone else is going with him on the trip. Accountability. I just as we close, if you ever have any questions, you want to know, one of the important things I feel in our leadership here is to make sure that we're accountable, we're transparent about finances. And we've done a lot of work in the last little while, making sure there are some very clear and we're always updating them and refreshing them, making them better. But protocols and policies and guidelines, the handling of all resources. And so you can ask the staff or those that are involved. They say, man alive, you sign this, you initial there, everybody else has somebody else making sure that it's according to budget. And we put that in. Not only the agencies we partner with, they demand it from us, but we do more than they demand from us because we want to be able to be accountable and be people of integrity. So if you have any questions of how that is, I'm happy to show with you our financial policy and any of those things. Happy to do that. In the same way that Paul does here. He just kind of says, hey, I'm challenging you to be generous, but I also need to be transparent about some of those things. Things like in the offering, there's always multiple people that are doing it. We have, when the offerings are taken on Sunday, just an example, the offering taken on Sunday, there's always a group of ushers that are there. Not the same people all the time, but different people will take it. They put it in a bag that's numbered and sealed and write down that number of that bag. Now, that bag cannot be opened again until someone else compares the log and says, okay, we're going to open this bag from Sunday morning. On Monday morning, it's counted. It's put in a safe until then. On Monday morning, it's counted. Different individuals go, and not just one person, goes to the safe, open it up. There's always more than one. Opens it up, gets the bag. They compare the log with the number that's on the bag. A sealed bag, and there's no way you can open the bag without ripping it and rendering it useless. You look at the log. That's the number it's on the bag. It's good. Those two people sign off on that, bring it back, and it's not opened up until it's a group of people that are counted. All along the way, it goes right from it's given to when the check is written. All along the way, safeguards with more than one pair of eyes, more than one signature, more than one person that says okay with the expense on making sure all the way from the beginning to the end. Why? Because people have given sacrificially and given generously, and because there are needs that need to be met, and we want to make sure every dollar gets there. Ministering to believers and unbelievers, notice that as well. That Paul is, when he gives his log, he tells them where he's going, what he's doing. He makes a point of saying that this is not just now ministering to those people who are believers, but to those who are not part of the family of God either. I'm going to have the worship team come up. We're going to close the service this morning. For those who have freely received, the question is never, do I give, but how much? It's never for those. We believers and Christians, we've received so generously. It's not, should I give? Do I give? It's never. The instructions are always, they need to give in proportion that God has blessed them. Give generously, not grudgingly. But it's not, should they or shouldn't they? The only time was they shouldn't was they gave so much that they had to say stop. So if you think that's a problem, come and see me, and I'll definitely give you that command. And I would love to be able to make that bulletin announcement. You know, I remember when I was in Africa, we came with a gift. We were in Kenya. One of my first times there, I was traveling with a missionary, and we had helping a region that was particularly difficult among the Maasai. The Maasai are usually very tall. You see them wearing a lot. They like red. They're the ones, if you've seen it on probably video clips or something, they jump when they dance. Very high. They usually have like a necklace that's kind of around their neck, and it bounces. They just go boing. They're like a pogo stick. They're nomads. They're herdsmen. They travel around usually in mud huts. People of the land. I remember we came with this generous gift with one of our missionaries, and I was just tag along. I brought a little bit of my gift into the generosity. We were helping a certain area that had been hit hard by drought. We came and we were having tea, because you can't just go and leave. You have to make a friend. So we were sitting and we were having chai, and as we were having chai, one of the leaders of the area came by, and we're sitting I was big, tall, I looked like a stork. The seat was so low, but they're all the same way. They say, oh, you're a good Maasai, because, I was 6'2", so they thought, oh, yeah, you're tall. And long necks. I have a long neck as well. So long necks is the other sign of great beauty. So it has a beauty. And so I would sit down, and we're both sitting there on these little wee stools with my knees up in the air. And this man came and just buried his face in the dirt. I was like, what is he doing? The interpreter explained. He said, he is saying thank you. He's saying thank you. When they have an expression of compassion that's overwhelming, the only way they say thank you is they bury their head in the ground. And they say out loud, my head is in the dirt. That's like the phrase. It's the phrase they say. They know it means thank you for your compassion. But it's literally translated, my head's in the dirt. What you've done, I don't know how to say thanks, so I put my head in the dirt. There is something about those that have received bless that is just unavoidable. there's also something equally, unavoidably unhealthy about those who have received but refuse to give. Something unhealthy about Christians who are stingy. Showing compassion to those in need demonstrates our connection to Christ and shows the life of Christ. It was his nature to give. His good news was good news for the poor. So if we are going to be Christians, then we cannot accept anything short than the requirement, the condition that was given by Peter, James, and John to Paul in Galatians. Absolutely go. Leave here today. But just one thing I say to you, one condition as you go. Remember the poor when you go. Be generous because God has been generous with you. The Ecclesiastes verse, be generous, invest in the acts of charity. Charity yields high returns. Don't hoard your goods, spread them around. Be a blessing to others. It says in Proverbs, when you give to the poor, Proverbs 19:17, it's like lending to the Lord, and the Lord will pay you back.